Welcome to Establishing Realistic Speed Limits and More. I'm Joanna Johnson, Managing Director here at the Road Commission of Kalamazoo County. I want to thank all of our board members who are participating today, as well as our team. This is part of a series of informational meetings that we have scheduled for this year. It's our first one here in 2021. Some of you may have attended similar seminars or informational meetings with us in the past. Typically, we have done those in person. So we're bringing this one to you in a new platform. Please save the date. We do have a next session planned in our series called Transportation 101. It is scheduled for May 13th, Thursday, May 13th at 9 o'clock. Yet to be determined as to whether it will be in a webinar platform or in person or potentially even hybrid. But save the date, Transportation Funding 101, Thursday, May 13th at 9 o'clock. We are proud to say that we do have State House Fiscal Analyst, William Hamilton, who will be joining us for that presentation. And again, some of you in the past may have seen him or participated in our similar type seminars. So appreciate you being here today on Establishing Realistic Speeds and More. I'd like to introduce our speed limit session presentation team for today. We have Lieutenant Lance Cook. He has been with the Michigan State Police for 28 years. He is a fully accredited traffic crash reconstructionist. We also have Sergeant Brandon Davis. He has been with the Michigan State Police for 12 years. He too is a fully accredited traffic crash reconstructionist. And part of his role also includes conducting traffic engineering studies. And Mr. Jim Hoekstra, our very own traffic and project engineer here at the Road Commission of Kalamazoo County. He has worked with us in some capacity since 2011 and is a licensed professional engineer. He is our key contact for local traffic safety, including engineering and speed studies. So remember, use the Q&A box throughout the presentation to ask your questions. They will be reviewed at the end of the presentation. And again, for anyone participating by telephone, we will acknowledge you once we have completed those in the Q&A box. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sergeant Davis.
Well, hey, good morning. I appreciate everybody coming to participate in this training. So what I'm going to do, let me pull up my PowerPoint here and we will get going. Okay. Can everybody see the PowerPoint? Yes. Okay. So what we're going to do, we're going to go over establishing safe and realistic speed limits, the process that we use to do that, the reasoning that we use behind that to conduct those studies. And we're going to go into a lot of detail. So there's a lot more to this than what really meets the eye upon the initial thought of how speed limits are set. Okay, so the whole purpose of establishing safe and realistic speed limits is to prevent serious injury and fatal traffic crashes. So unfortunately, being a reconstructionist, my job is to investigate those type of crashes. You know, if I could put myself out of business, I would probably do that in a heartbeat, because every crash is somebody losing a life that's unexpected, it's unplanned, and it impacts just more than that person. It impacts a lot of people. So, you know, to reiterate, what we're doing is to try to prevent this from happening. So when we talk about traffic crashes, we measure those per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. So you can see in this graph here, back from 1940 to 2009, there's been a downward trend. So if you look, it looks like it peaks at about 1941 with just under 13 fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. And that's decreased to just under 1 in 2009. So that's been a huge decrease. So we went from just about 13 to just about 1. And that's not by coincidence. That's through good sound engineering principles. updates in vehicles such as airbags, seatbelt use, crumple zones. All these things have helped, and they've all worked together to decrease the amount of fatal crashes we have, but we still encounter fatal crashes. So we can look at the decade in a glance. If you look at the graph here, we have years ranging from 2018 to 2008. So total crashes have remained about 300,000 plus or minus. There's a little decrease here between 2009 and 2013, and that's primarily due to the economy. You know, people were traveling less at that time for pleasure. Jobs were hard to come by, so fewer people traveling to and from work. But you can see that the fatality rate per 100 million vehicle miles traveled is pretty consistent, right about that 1, maybe slightly under 1. Now let's look a little bit further here. You can see the fatality restraint use. That's hovered right around 50 to 55%. So, you know, 50 to 55% of fatal crashes involve somebody not being restrained properly. Also, you can look at the alcohol and drug involved fatal crashes. Same there, they hover around 35 to 45% of the fatal crashes. So, and I see that holding very true. Last week, I worked 5 fatal crashes, and 3 of those were suspecting drug or alcohol involved. So that's a pretty fair and accurate number that I'm seeing that those statistics are backing up. So what we're going to do with this PowerPoint, we're going to talk about the types of speed zones, because not all speed limit signs are created equal. We're going to go over how speed limits are established, the effects of raising or lowering speed limits, some real world examples of speed limits, and then school speed zones as well. So we're going to cover all of those in this presentation. And hopefully we can clear up some of the misconceptions around speed limits. So type of speed zones, primarily we have 3 that we deal with. We have statutory, which are fixed speed limits and they're legislatively set. We have modified speed limits. Modified speed limits are established by a traffic control order, which is based off the speed study, the engineering studies that we do. Then we also have what's called defined speed limits. Defined speed limits are going to be established through the Michigan Vehicle Code. So, talking about statutory speed zones, there's no traffic control order needed for a statutory speed zone. So this is established through the Michigan Vehicle Code, such as the default 55 mile per hour zone. So if a roadway is unposted, it defaults to 55 miles per hour. Also the gravel road speed limit being 55 miles per hour. And then our freeway speed limits, such as the 70 mile per hour limited access speed limit. So those are set legislatively. No matter what speed study is done, they are fixed at that speed. But what about the newer 65 and 75 mile per hour speed limits? So they've tested this out with 600 miles on limited access freeway, where they raised it from 70 to 75, and 900 miles on trunk lines, so M roads, from 55 to 65 miles per hour. So these weren't just random selection of roads. These were roads where the 85th percentile already exceeded or met that speed increase. So the speed of the road isn't changing. They're just upping the number on the sign to reflect what the speed of that road is. So some examples of that are going to be US 131 north of Grand Rapids, where it used to be 70, it's now 75. You also have I-69 near Flint. And US 2 in the Upper Peninsula went from 55 miles per hour to 65 miles per hour. So these are some of the test areas where they're doing that. And that's written into law. So now modified speed limits. So these are covered under 257.628, which mandates that we must have a valid traffic control order to establish the legal speed limit. So this is going to be for any roadway that has any number on a sign other than 55 that doesn't meet the statutory or a defined speed limit. We're going to be doing a modified speed limit to justify the reasoning for raising or lowering that speed limit. So for trunk lines, with modified speed limits, I have the MDOT side and then I've got the local road commission side. So essentially the process is exactly the same, but on M roads, I'm dealing with MDOT, and with local roads, I'm dealing with the road commission. But once a traffic control order is signed and filed by the county clerk's office, that's going to put that speed limit into effect 24/7 every day of that year. So once it's written and it's deemed to be good, it's set at that, and people adjust their speed down due to, inclement weather or any other factors that may influence the speed of that road. Again, it's going to be the same for county, but instead of working with MDOT, now I'm working with the county road commission. Defined speed limits. So defined speed limits are 15, 25, 35, and 45 mile per hour speed limits. And they're taken from a specific wording in the Michigan Vehicle Code. So if you have an area that meets the criteria for a business district or a mobile home park or a residential subdivision or vehicular access points, you can establish that speed limit without doing a traffic control order or a speed study because it's defined by the Michigan Vehicle Code. The problem is a lot of times people don't read the terminology or the definitions of those speed, and they tend to misapply it to how they want to perceive it. But the vehicle code is very specific on their definitions. They've really cleared up a lot where some of the old wording was a little vague. It's very clear now. So we have to make sure that we are sticking to the terminology and the definitions and not using this as a blanket, for instance, to make a whole village at 25 miles per hour. So very specific definitions, which we're going to be going into more detail. So a business district, as you can see from the photo, we have commercial businesses that occupy more than 50% of the total frontage on both sides of the road. So to be a business district, you have to have that old downtown feel where you've got businesses on both sides, commercial establishments, and they have to span a distance of 600 feet or more in length to fit the definition of the business district. So if you have a downtown area that fits that, you do not need to have a traffic control order or a speed study. You can simply post it at 25 miles per hour based off the defined speed limits in the Michigan Vehicle Code. So this is a great example of what an actual business district is, but you see this being misapplied at times. For example, just because there's a commercial business on a road does not mean that that road automatically reduces to 25 miles per hour. So you can write people tickets. It's being misapplied in that context. This one here, we get a lot of questions on. So a residential subdivision. So the definition is quite clear. So for an area to meet the residential subdivision criteria, it has to be a system of interconnected highways with no through highways. That's the big key word. So if you look at this map here that I have posted on the PowerPoint, you can see that 8th Street is going to be a through road. That's a main county roadway. And so is Q Avenue. That's your through street. But if you look within this residential area, we have a dead end here. We have numerous houses within this area. We have 1, 2, 3 exits and entrances. So this is going to be a great example of what a residential subdivision is. It's a system of interconnected highways with no through highways, with minimal entrance and exits. So if you fit that definition, you don't need to have a traffic control order or a speed study conducted to have this be a 25-mile-per-hour speed limit. And also, it's not required to post that within the subdivision as well. Now let's talk about vehicular access points. So vehicular access points, an access point is simply any driveway. It could be a public driveway, a commercial driveway, a private driveway. We count any access point to that main road. We count that, and then depending on how many there are within a half mile, we can set a defined speed limit. So if you look at this PowerPoint, if you have 60 or more vehicular access points within a half mile, you can set that at 25 miles per hour as the speed limit without doing a traffic engineering study or a speed study to back that up. The thing is, these access points are right in line with what a speed study result would be anyways, because people drive a speed they feel comfortable based on the environment. So the more vehicular access points you have, the less the speed is going to be on that road. And this is just kind of a way to establish a speed limit. And we typically use these for very low traveled roads where doing a speed study is going to be not the easiest just due to the lack of number of vehicles traveling that road. Or if they're requesting, let's say, a dead end that's less than a half mile in length, we can do this to help establish that speed limit. Again, no traffic control order is needed for this type of speed limit setting process. However, if there is a conflicting number and it is a road where you can do a speed study on, and yet we're choosing to do vehicular access points because it may get the speed limit 5 miles per hour lower, the vehicle code says that the speed study trumps the vehicular access points.
Can I jump in for a second, Brandon?
Yes.
The intent of this section was not to circumvent the scientific study to find the perfect speed for that particular stretch of road. This is more of a quick and dirty method based again on 85th percentiles matching in most cases what we get with a study. It was designed for cities and villages without a traffic engineer to be able to go out and post a speed that's going to be close most of the time versus having to pay for a traffic engineer to come in and do it. As a general rule, we will not be using this method for county and state road when we're doing TCO because, again, it's quick and dirty and it's not as specific to the roadway as the scientific process.
Okay, so continuing on. So there's a way we can prorate this as well. So prorating vehicular access points simply means if you have a stretch of road that's under a half mile in length, we can make an adjustment so that it fits the vehicular access points and the speed limit properly. So if you look, here's an example. We have 39 access points, excuse me, on a 0.3 of a mile stretch roadway. So if you look at the defined speed limits on this, 39 access points would place the speed limit at 45 miles per hour based off the defined speed limit. If we prorate that, it actually has an equivalent of 65 access points, which would then place that speed limit at 25 miles per hour. So basically that's saying if you have a stretch of roadway that's under a half mile, you can make an adjustment for that to fit the proper speed limit. So we're going to talk about a little bit of ensuring compliance. So I handle TCOs for any county or state roadways. And the way I do that is defined by law. It's not what I feel it should be. It's not, what others think it should be. It's a very clear process set by law. So I don't do these for cities or villages if they do them themselves, but they still have to follow the same process, and it's defined in law that they are to abide by that process. It's actually a misdemeanor if we don't do that. So I've never had to, submit a warrant for anybody. I've threatened it once on a certain department, which I hated to do, but it got very political, got very ugly, and there were some very wrong things going on in that circumstance. But we don't want it to come to that, but that is in law that I could be, cited a misdemeanor for not following this process. So another thing I see here, we have a lot of people that reference some older terms. The motor vehicle code changes, there's updates, there's redactions, and it's real important to stay current on that. So we still see and hear a lot of people referencing prima facie speeds. Although prima facie is no longer in the motor vehicle code, and essentially defined speed limits that have kind of taken the place of that terminology. We also have absolute speed limits. That was replaced by modified speed limits, which we've already talked about. And then they've redacted the term platted subdivision or any other terminology under the Land Division Act, or a residential district. That was also removed in 2006. So what we used to have are cities or villages who would say, hey, this whole area is a platted subdivision, therefore every speed limit on the road is going to be 25 miles per hour. So essentially that's kind of taken the ability for them to do that out, where now you're actually going to have to do true traffic studies and surveys to properly set those speed limits, as opposed to just an arbitrary number thrown on a sign for their entire village or city. So those are the two common ones that I still see being used and misapplied today, is the platted subdivision and the residential district, which again are no longer part of the Michigan Vehicle Code. How are modified speed limits established? So I've already kind of hinted to this earlier, but for state and county roads, the process is nearly identical, except for the state, I'm working with MDOT employees, and county roads, I'm working with the local road commissions. So any roadway where we want to reduce it from 55 miles per hour could be qualified for a modified speed limit, but it has to be backed up by a speed study and an engineering study. So any road that's not going to be covered under the statutorily set speed limits or the defined speed limits, we can take this and use it as an avenue to either decrease or increase the speed of a road based on the 85th percentile speeds of the traffic that are using that road. It's not me. I don't set the speed limit. I simply record what traffic is already doing. And then we look at everything that surrounds that, and we put that into a traffic control document and sign it accordingly. So there's some things in here. Gravel roads with counties of populations exceeding 1 million, which, Lieutenant, if you could help me out on this, I think is maybe only Wayne County.
Wayne and Oakland. The language was actually at the request of some squeaky wheels in Oakland County.
Okay, so basically, if you're outside of Wayne or Oakland County, you're not able to reduce a gravel road speed limit from 55 through a traffic control order. So that really doesn't apply to us over here in Southwest Michigan, but it is good to know as well. So what we do is we analyze traffic crash data. So number, rate, types of crashes, we want to find out why these crashes are happening, the true details of a crash, right? So is it drug involved, alcohol involved? Did it occur on a winter snowstorm blizzard day where the snow and ice are covering the roadway? So we need to look at that and factor out what is happening on this road. Why are crashes occurring, if there are any crashes? And get into the details to figure out what we could do to fix that problem. We also exclude animal involved crashes. So any car deers, you can see here, I struck a turkey going down the road last year, and I didn't prop him up there. That's how he was. And I poked him and he flew away. So it did some damage to my car, but I'm not going to look at that as a reportable traffic crash when I'm pulling stats to do these studies. So I'm looking at real actual crashes with human involvement and vehicle involvement. So we want to look at the development of the area as well. So it's safe to say a downtown district is going to be different than a 2-lane county roadway with open cornfields all around it. Or let's say a lakeside area where you have a lot of houses in a really small, tight, confined area. So we're going to look at that as well and note that. We also want to know the roadway configuration. So the number of lanes, the alignment of the road, any hills, curves, what type of shoulder does the road have? You know, is there, 3 feet of gravel and then 15 feet of manicured grass? Or is at the edge of the roadway a foot of weeds and then tall trees? So we're going to look at that as well. We then conduct a speed study on that road. And through that speed study, we determine the 85th percentile speed of that road. We take that 85th percentile speed, and then we round it to the nearest 5-mile-per-hour increment. Now that can go up or down, but it has to be the nearest. So if, let's say the speed of the road comes out with the 85th percentile of 43 miles per hour, by law, I have to round that to 45 miles per hour. I can't drop it down to 40. If it comes in at 42, then I can drop it down to 40. There is a small caveat in there where I can not round down, but that's only if the 50th percentile and the 85th percentile come within a couple miles per hour of each other. So let's say the 85th percentile is 43, the 50th percentile is 42, I have to set it at 45. We also take into account all other factors that influence traffic and pedestrian movement. So imagine yourself, you're driving down the road, you're on that county roadway where it's flat, it's straight, you've got cornfields on both sides of you, not a lot of houses or buildings or intersections, right? So you feel pretty safe driving, 55 miles per hour on that road. But now you're entering a transitional area, let's say into a city, where you might see sidewalks now. You might have people on sidewalks. You might have a lot of residential households on that road, driveways, intersections. You automatically start to decrease your speed and account for such items that you're seeing. The environment has changed. So once that environment starts to change, it's going to affect your driving behavior. And you don't have to have a sign to tell you to do that. You just naturally do it because you feel less safe driving at a higher speed. So how is a speed study completed? So when we go out and conduct the speed study, it's done on a nice day, right? So we don't want inclement weather. We don't want it to be raining, snowy. We don't want fog. We don't want anything to influence the free-flowing traffic of that road. So we typically use a LiDAR device, which is just a handheld speed measurement device, the same device that police officers use to write tickets, right? We can use that, or we can use an automated traffic counter. And that's something where we can place it on the road, leave it out there for a duration of time, and it's automatically collecting the speed data, along with a lot of other data too. it picks it up automatically. We go, we pick it up, we take it back, and then we download the data to determine what's going on that road. So when we do this, we don't want to advertise that we're going out there and doing it, because we want it to be natural, free flowing, and we don't want any outside influences to affect that, you know, whether speed limit's faster or slower. We want this to be somewhat conspicuous. So if we go out there, I'm not going to use a fully marked patrol car. I'm going to use an unmarked car, and I'm not going to advertise that I'm out there capturing people's speeds. Same goes with setting out the automated traffic counters. I don't really want people to know that, because I don't want them to try to influence the outcome. So we set it out there, it's kind of low key. That way there's no, or I should say there's a reduced risk of people trying to tamper with that. If you're using the LiDAR device, you have to be aware of what's called the Cosine Effect. So based on where you're positioned when you're capturing that speed data, it can throw the results of the true speed of that vehicle off. So for example, if you're standing at an angle to the roadway, that cosine effect is going to decrease the true speed of that vehicle. So the vehicle may be traveling 45 miles per hour, but based on the angle in relation to you and that device, the device is reading, let's say 42 miles per hour. So it's going to underreport some of those true speeds. So those are some things you have to be careful with, especially if you're the one out there conducting that speed study. You don't want to make a mistake and underreport it due to a simple error that maybe you're not aware of. So also, when we record these vehicle speeds, we're not doing this at intersections. We're not doing it at railroad crossings. We want to get a free flowing, accurate representation of that traffic or of that roadway at the best. And then those influencing factors decrease from there. So once the speeds are gathered, the 85th percentile is determined based off the results. So what is the 85th percentile speed? So this is going to be the speed that 85% of the vehicles are traveling at or below, approximately 1 standard deviation above the mean. So the ideal speed is to set as the maximum limit. So I know a lot of people have a misunderstanding that the speed limit is a minimum. No, that should be the max, and anybody above that could be cited for speeding. But this is going to provide the lowest speed variance between vehicles. So when I say speed variance, what we're talking about is we want traffic to be going at consistent speed. The safest speed for a roadway is not the lowest speed. The safest speed for a roadway is a speed that we can get the majority of traffic traveling at consistently. That's going to be the safest speed. And it's going to provide the lowest crash numbers, which I'm going to go into some more detail on that in a little bit here as well. It also provides optimum enforceability. So you're going to see in some of these real world examples that I show, when you have 90% of the traffic not obeying the speed limit, some are even 97, 98% of the traffic not obeying the speed limit, how do you expect law enforcement to take action and correct that? You can't. I mean, you can't write enough citations to fix that problem. It's not a speeding problem, it's a speed limit is set too low problem. But we'll show more about that in the real world examples coming up. So this also represents the safest drivers. So we're taking the 85th percentile. So you're going to see with this 85th percentile, you're going to have a certain population that no matter what the speed limit is, they're going to be driving in excess of that. You're also going to have people that are driving excessively slow, and both are just as dangerous. And that's who law enforcement really needs to focus on, are the people who are out in left field exceeding the speed limit based on what everybody else is doing. By setting a realistic speed limit based off the 85th percentile, it really helps law enforcement narrow down who that person is. Because now they're only looking at, 5% of the cars as opposed to 95% of the traffic breaking the speed limit. What is a variance? So a variance is going to be a statistical indicator of overall uniformity of the data set. So in the case of a speed study, variance provides a measure of the uniformity of traffic flow. So everybody driving a similar speed. We want it to be uniform. So the minimum variance is going to be the greatest uniformity, and maximum orderly traffic flow, which is going to be the least potential conflict between vehicles. So if you see here, I've got this graph. You can see we have a high rate or a high chance of being involved in an accident and a low chance. And then you can see down below we have the motorist speeds. So if you are traveling, 15 miles per hour below the flow of traffic, you are at a higher chance of getting in a crash, right? Here's the average speed. Average, half are there, half are not. And then we have our 85th percentile speed. So the 85th percentile speed comes right into this area. And that's going to be the safest because it's at the lowest point of that graph. Now you can see this quickly goes up with people who are excessively speeding. So if you're at 15 miles per hour over the 85th percentile, look how much more of a chance you have of being involved in a traffic crash. So that goes up. So that's what we're looking at. We're trying to get all the traffic to be right down in here at the lowest chance. Again, here's another graph showing nighttime, daytime, freeway. Same thing. You have your 85th percentile right in this area. And whether it's nighttime, daytime, or freeway, you basically have the same shape on that graph going all the way through. So there was a study that was put out with the effects of raising and lowering a speed limit. So this study was really informative. They did a really good job with this study, and it's one that we reference a lot, okay? So it was done in 1997, and the objective was to determine the effects of raising or lowering posted speed limits on driver behavior and crashes for non-limited access rural and urban highways. So essentially what that's saying is they looked at roads other than freeways, and they looked between the speeds of 20 and 55 miles per hour, both in a county setting, a rural setting, and a city setting. So they collected data in 22 different states at 100 different sites before and after they changed any of the speed limits on these roads. So they lowered the posted speed limit by as much as 20 miles per hour on some roads, and they raised the posted speed limit by as much as 15 miles per hour on some roads. So you can see they really took a diverse look at this, both lowering and adding speed. So the study findings, they found out that posted speed limits were set on average at the 45th percentile speed. So that's pretty low, right? So the 45th percentile, that's not much at all, right? And then they also said that speed limits were posted on an average of 5 to 16 miles per hour below the 85th percentile speed. So we've already talked about how that 85th percentile speed is the safest for reducing your chances of being in a crash, and they've essentially cut that in half. But what they found is posting a lower speed limit does not decrease the motorist speed. On the contrary, posting a higher speed limit does not create a corresponding increase in vehicle speeds. So this here is a huge question I have anytime we do speed studies and the results come out unfavorable to those in the area. Their main concern is now that we've raised that speed limit, let's say from 25 to 35 miles per hour, now traffic's going to be doing 45 miles per hour. And that's just simply not correct. So what influences the speed of the road is the environment. So people don't drive based off speed limits. They drive a speed they feel safe at based on the environment that they're in. And what this study has shown is that that's true. That's not just me saying that. They have actual statistical data backing that up. So on average, with any change in the percentile speeds was less than 1.5 miles per hour, whether they raised it or lowered it. So again, that shows that it's not the number on the sign, it's the environment. So setting speed limits in the region of the 85th percentile speed has an extremely beneficial effect on driver compliance with the posted speed limit. So, you know, I drove down to Tennessee a few weeks ago and I was going through Indiana and I was kind of chuckling to myself because the road I was on in Indiana was a freeway and it would change from 50 miles per hour to 65 miles per hour, then down to 55, then up to 70 miles per hour. But it was the same road, the same environment, and the speed of the traffic I was traveling with was essentially the same at about 77 miles per hour. So the speed limit itself isn't what's dictating the speed of the road, it's the environment. So artificially low speed limits set at the 33rd percentile speed provides a non-compliance rate of approximately 67%. And I see that when I do my speed studies. You know, there's a road that I just did a speed study on. It had a 2% compliance rate. And one of the drivers that were in that compliant had their hands typing away on their cell phone in front of their steering wheel. So they weren't even paying attention to what they were doing driving. And they were one of the two cars that was compliant. So we can post any number on a sign, but that's not going to affect the speed of the road. So the study also found that artificially lowering speed limits can cause an increase in crashes. Okay, let me say that again. Lowering the speed limit artificially can cause an increase in crashes. Appropriately, increasing speed limits can cause a decrease in crashes. So artificially lowering the speed limits more than 5 miles per hour below the 85th percentile did not reduce crashes. So these are all from the study's findings. So the conclusion of the study was most motorists did not decrease or increase their speed as a result in either lowering or raising the posted speed limit by 5, 10, or 15 miles per hour. And this confirms most motorists do not alter their speed to conform to speed limits they perceive as unreasonable for the prevailing conditions. Lowering the speed limit did not reduce vehicle speeds or crashes, and lowering speed limits decreases drivers' compliance and crashes tend to increase. Raising the posted speed limit did not increase speeds and crashes. Again, that's the biggest hurdle I have to overcome when I'm trying to explain to people that the speed limit changed on their road. They think that's going to automatically mean that people are going to be driving 5 to 10 miles faster than what's posted. And that's just simply not the case. So all states use the 85th percentile as a major criterion for establishing safe and reasonable speed limits. But recently posted speed limits in the study deviated far from the 85th percentile. So we all say that we're using this 85th percentile, but when they do a check in an audit, they're finding that the speed of the road differs from the 85th percentile that's posted on that sign. And the common cited reason was public and political pressure. And I see that on a daily basis. Conducting the speed study and understanding the theory behind it is super simple, but navigating the public and political pressure to raise or lower a speed limit is difficult. And a lot of times when you try explaining this to somebody, they don't want to listen. So I can spend an hour and a half on a phone with somebody, and I may as well have been talking to a block wall because they don't want to hear what I have to say. I'm not a salesman. I'm a person doing my job, which is dictated by law. And I feel that's the best way to do it. And it's the way that the law prescribes. And it's based off of engineering principles, not emotions and political reasons. So that is typically the main reasons where the 85th percentile deviates. Other factors such as land use, pedestrian activity, crash history are often subjectively considered into the decision-making process. So if you remember where I talked about driving down that county road, now you're entering that city where you have sidewalks, maybe pedestrians, a lot of access points, intersections, you start to decrease your speed. Well, the same thing goes with the speed of your vehicle, right? So when we're obtaining that 85th percentile speed, that's already factored in. But a lot of times what people want to do is then factor an additional count due to the fact that there may be a park off of that roadway, or it may be a school off of that roadway. But those are already factored in based off of people's driving behaviors, based on what they feel safe driving. So the data collected during the study indicated that there are no benefits either from a safety or operational point of view from establishing speed limits less than the 85th percentile speed. So again, there's no benefits. The only thing it changes is the public's perception as to the speed of their road being safe or unsafe. So let's talk about some real world examples here. So the first one is, we get a lot of questions about, well, hey, everybody's speeding on this road, you need to take more enforcement action. So what difference does putting a marked patrol car out on an improperly posted speed limit road make? So we did a study here. So if you look at this photo, you can see there's a 5-lane roadway. It's posted at 35 miles per hour. There's a decent amount of light poles. It looks like everything's back off of the roadway, so it's manicured grass. There's not houses or businesses right up to the edge of that roadway. So people are going to probably feel a little bit safer driving faster than 35 on this road, just based off the environment. So we throw a patrol car in there and we record the difference. So if you look, the results on the left, we have a bell graph here. The speed limit's posted at 35 miles per hour, but the 85th percentile is at 43 miles per hour. Okay, so that's with without a patrol car there. So you can see the bell graph comes out here. The majority of traffic is exceeding that 35 mile per hour speed limit. And looking at this, it should probably be set at about 45 to 40 miles per hour based on exactly where that came out. So we add the addition of a fully marked police car and we look and see what difference that made. These two graphs look almost identical. The one on the right with the patrol car and the one on the left without the patrol car. So it decreased the 85th percentile by approximately 1 mile per hour. So it really didn't make that much of a difference. People feel safe driving that speed, and it didn't make a difference having a marked patrol car out there, even knowing that they were speeding. So we're going to go over some more real world examples. These ones are going to be without the presence of a police car. These are just going to be before and after speed studies that we've conducted and the outcomes. So we're going to talk about and go over freeway, trunk line, and county roads. So we'll start with a 6-lane freeway. So this is going to be I-496, which is going to be downtown Lansing. It cuts right through the downtown corridor. The speed limit was set at 55 miles per hour. So at 55 miles per hour, which is this top one, we had 2.4% compliance rate with that speed limit on that road. So everybody down here is exceeding the speed limit. And then if we look, the 85th percentile speed is 73 miles per hour. So to expect law enforcement to go out here and fix this speeding problem is unrealistic. It's not going to happen. This is a speed limit issue, not a speeding issue. The speed limit is set artificially too low. When the 85th percentile is at 73, it's posted at 55, and you have a 2.4% compliance rate. So what we did, we raised this speed limit to 70 miles per hour. Now let's look at this bell graph. It's much more precise, right? So you have a 50th percentile speed at 68 miles per hour. And the 85th percentile is at 72 miles per hour. So if you look closely, by raising the speed limit from 55 to 70 miles per hour, it actually decreased the 85th percentile by 1 mile per hour. Not only did we decrease the overall speed of that road by raising the speed limit, look at the group, the uniformity that we have. The majority of our traffic is driving in this 72 to 66 mile per hour range. That's what we want. We don't want all of these 55s competing for the same space of roadway as all of these people in the 70 to 73 mile per hour range. Also, what we look at is the aggressive driving. When you have two conflicting groups of speeds trying to occupy the same road, the crash rate goes up because now you have road rage issues, you have tailgating issues, you have improper passing, lane changes, abrupt lane changes. When you're doing 75 and you come up to somebody doing 55 miles per hour in the freeway, sometimes that catches you off guard and you make an evasive maneuver to avoid from rear-ending that car, or just to get around it so you don't have to slow down. It takes all of that away. We get everybody in a somewhat consistent speed because the uniformity is what reduces the traffic crashes. So this is a good example of I-496 downtown Lansing. We also have the same thing on I-69 in Flint. So you can see here it was posted at 55 miles per hour, which is going to be the study on the left. So at 55 miles per hour, they had, it looks like 5 people in compliance out of the 309 vehicles that they took speed measurement readings from. So out of 309 vehicles, 5 are doing the speed limit. Again, that's not a speeding issue. That's a speed limit is improperly set. And if you look here, we have 2 defined groups of people on this road, right? So we can see a bell graph here, it kind of ends, and then we have a second bell graph here, and then it ends. So with it set at 55 miles per hour, the 85th percentile comes in at 74 miles per hour. Now, if we look at it after we posted it to 70 miles per hour, look at our bell graph. That's an actual bell graph, right? So it's not 2 separate ones, it's one. The 85th percentile speed, again, decreased by 1 mile per hour. And it puts everybody in this grouping of 67 to 73 miles per hour, right in here. And I shouldn't say everybody, the majority of people. And that's what we want. We want people driving a uniform speed because that's going to be the safest for the people on the roadway. And it's showing the number on the speed limit sign doesn't play a factor. If it's artificially too low, people are going to continue to drive a speed they feel more comfortable driving based off the environment, not the sign that's posted. We can look at a 3-lane trunk line. So this is M43 in East Lansing. So this is like MSU campus area, if you're familiar. It was improperly posted at 25 miles per hour. So let's look at this. At 25 miles per hour, you had 2 vehicles doing 25 miles per hour out of 155 vehicles that were surveyed, I should say. So 2 vehicles driving the speed limit. But we're going to fix the speeding problem by going out there and writing all of these good drivers bad tickets, right? And we're going to expect to change the speed of that road, and it's not going to happen because the environment hasn't changed. So let's look at this. 2 people at 25, which is the speed limit. The 85th percentile is 36 miles per hour. The speed limit was raised to 35 miles per hour because that's what the 85th percentile dictated. And this is after we posted it at 35 miles per hour. It's almost identical to what it was before we made that speed change. Now let's look at these side by side. So the study on the left is when it was posted at 25. The study on the right is when it's posted at 35. Look at the bell graph on both of those. The 85th percentile stayed exactly the same at 36 miles per hour. Nothing changed. Literally, nothing changed on this road. But the perception that our speed limit on our road went from 25 to 35, now it's going to be dangerous, and now everybody's going to be doing 45 miles per hour. In the numerous studies, thousands of studies do not back that up, but that's the public's perception as to if you raise the speed limit, it's going to make my road unsafe now. But in fact, nothing changes other than that number on the sign. This is going to be a 5-lane county road. So again, you can see it's flat. It looks like it's maybe a transitional area. In fact, this may be, yeah, I can't recall where this one was taken at, so I apologize. But 5-lane, relatively flat, commercial businesses. So, okay, this is Waverly Road in Delta Township. So the speed limit was set properly at 45 miles per hour. So if you look at the 85th percentile, it came in at 43 miles per hour. We round to the nearest 5 mile per hour increment, which is going to be 45 miles per hour. And this is what the bell graph looks like. So even though it's posted at 45, the majority of traffic is still down here, right? They're not even exceeding that 45 because it's a properly set speed limit based off of facts and data, not emotion and politics. So the perception is that higher speed will make the roadway less safe because the public falsely thinks the actual travel speeds will increase. And I just showed you that's not the case. These are only a handful of samples. If you're here in my office, I have a cabinet, right? And I cover 9 counties in my district, but for every county, there's a district reconstructionist who does the same thing. And I literally have a file cabinet with thousands of traffic control orders, and it's consistent. We show you a sample of 3 because I don't have time to sit here and go over thousands and thousands of these, but this is what we're seeing. And it's hard to get the public to sometimes understand that when they have their mind made up that a faster speed limit is going to make their road less safe, when in fact it's not. So it also gives people a false sense of security. So if you see that your road's posted at 25, you might feel safe letting your kids walk down the sidewalk, or you might be feel safe crossing the road at certain times. But in actuality, that sign is 15 miles per hour below what the actual traffic is going. It might give you a false sense of security where you take more risky behavior actions. Now, if it's posted properly and you see that, hey, you know, it's signs posted at 45, traffic's going 45, I might not want my kids riding their bike on that sidewalk. I might not want to, you know, run across the road to, you know, go to a store. I may seek a different method, so I'm not putting myself at risk. So it's actually safer because it's accurate. It's not misleading. So the perception of the roadway becoming less safe is the only thing that changes. Travel speeds do not. Okay, I can sit here and say that over and over and over again. Travel speeds do not change. It's only the perception. So why do speed limits need to be both safe and realistic? So a proper speed limit is going to minimize variance, which is going to improve the uniform traffic flow. So that's what we've discussed a lot. We want everybody going at consistent speed because that's going to reduce crashes, because what that does, that reduces road rage incidents, that reduces tailgating, that reduces improper lane changes, improper passing, or passing at times where you're cutting it close because you're driving 15 miles per hour slower than what you think you should be driving. So it reduces that. It also allows law enforcement to focus on the serious violators. If you have a compliance rate of 2% and you're pulling over car after car after car, you're just giving good drivers bad tickets. When in fact, what you should be doing is targeting those who are driving excessively fast and giving the bad drivers good tickets. That's who law enforcement needs to focus on to correct issues. But giving a person who doesn't feel that they're doing anything wrong because the speed limit's posted 10 miles per hour lower than what it should be, that's not correcting a problem. That's just making people mad and driving their insurance rates up. So it allows law enforcement to focus on those who need our attention. It also reinforces the credibility and acceptance of traffic controls, right? So if it's set properly, people are going to be more willing to accept that and obey the law. But if you have something that's in left field and people don't feel they're doing anything wrong by disobeying it, they're going to disobey it. And it's going to represent maximum speeds under ideal conditions. Remember, so it's a flat road, it's dry, straight stretch is what we try to do. And then when you come up to curves, you need to adjust for that by decreasing your speed. So again, when we do these 85th percentile speeds, that's based off ideal conditions. So that's going to kind of wrap up the statutory, the modified, the defined speed limits, and we're going to transition into school speed limits. But before I do that, Lieutenant, do you have anything that you would like to add or clarify or say anything else before we move on?
No, I think you've covered it pretty well, Brandon. Thanks.
Okay, so school zone speed limits. I don't want to say it's complicated, but there are several things you have to be aware of and keep in mind to be in compliance with the law. And we're going to go over those in this presentation. So school speed limits are covered under the Motor Vehicle Code 257.627A. So this is actually written into our Motor Vehicle Code. Very much like a defined speed limit, school zones have very specific terminology and definitions which must be followed to be legal and in compliance. So if done properly, a school speed zone should be clear and concise for roadway users. And I kind of laugh at this picture I put up here. If you're driving through here, does that sign, is that clear and concise? I'd bet to venture no. I didn't think it was. So we took a photo and we posted it. That is not clear. That's just not what we want to go for. All right, so we want it to be clear and concise because we don't want people to be in violation. We want them to know when it's a school zone, where the school zone starts and ends, and what speed is appropriate for that school zone. So schools, per the Michigan Vehicle Code, are defined as an educational institute operated by a local, private, denominational, or paracore organization. And what that means is it doesn't have to just be a public school. So, but to be a school, to make the definition, there are certain things that each one of those organizations have to meet. So school zone parameters extend no more than 1,000 feet from the school property line in any direction. So if your school property ends at a certain point, you can only reach out 1,000 feet or less beyond that for your school zone. So again, you can't put it out there a mile before your school, a half mile. It's only 1,000 feet before and after your school property line. So the purpose of a school speed zone is to limit and protect kids walking to school. So this is one that we see a lot of. To meet that definition, it specifically states in the motor vehicle code that you have to have a walking population to that school. So if it's a in-residence school or the entire population of that school is bused in, it doesn't count as a school speed zone. So you can't post signs, you can't reduce the speed of the road in front of you because this is designed for walking children. There seems to be a lot of disconnect there, but that's how it's written in the law. All it takes though is one student to walk. If you have one student, you're good, you meet that school zone definition. So also, school zone speed limits don't apply if you have an overhead crosswalk. So this is going to be a photo of Charlotte High School. And just outside of this photo, kind of over where my red pointer's at, there's an elementary school. And what they elected to do was to put up a overhead crosswalk. Now I went to this school, I'm from Charlotte area, and that got used a lot. You don't think it would, but it really did, because over on this left side of the photo is a residential area. So you have all these residential areas of high school and elementary school children walking to those buildings. They were using this crosswalk. You can see they also have some guardrails there to prohibit people walking through that, to encourage them to use that crosswalk and not just dart across the road trying to get to and from school. But by having this, they don't qualify for that reduced speed zone. Now I see here, it looks like it's posted at 30 miles per hour. We're going to talk more into how much we can reduce the speed zones if you qualify. And with this case, it wouldn't be by much. So the school zone time parameters. So this is where the school superintendents have a little bit of room to tailor it to their needs, right? So they can't tailor the amount of time. The amount of time is a half an hour before school, after school, or if you have an off-campus lunch, you can assign that as a half an hour as well. So again, the decreased speed limit is only active a half an hour before, during lunch, if you have an off-campus lunch, and a half an hour after school. It's not the whole school day. It's only during those half-hour time limits. And it has to end at the nearest 5-minute interval. That way you don't have what we showed with that photo of the sign where you have very awkward times of starting and ending. It has to be a 5-minute interval. So where the superintendents can come into play is they can choose how they want those half an hour time limits assigned. So let's say your school starts at 7:45, right? So you have an option. You can do 7:15 to 7:45. You can do 7:20 to 7:50. You can tailor it to how you want that, but you can't exceed that half an hour time frame. And hopefully I'm making that clear. But it's defined by law, and that's how it is. So with that 30-minute time frame, that means law enforcement can only enforce that school speed zone during those times that are listed. School superintendents no longer have a role in setting the speed limit near their school boundaries, because now it's defined by law. They actually have a definition of how we set those speed limits. So a school speed zone may not be decreased by more than 20 miles per hour under the posted speed limit. Okay, so you can only decrease it by a maximum of 20 miles per hour. and it shall not be less than 25 miles per hour, regardless of the posted speed limit. So let's say it's a 30 mile per hour speed zone. We can't drop that down to a 10 mile per hour speed zone for the school. So I'll do a couple of examples here, and hopefully that will kind of clarify things. So if the posted speed limit is 55 miles per hour, the school zone can only be decreased to 35 miles per hour because we can only deduct to a maximum of 20 miles per hour. So it goes from 55 to 35. Now let's say the zone is 45 miles per hour. We can deduct 20 miles per hour from that and decrease it to 25 miles per hour. So again, a maximum of 20 miles per hour, speed limit drop, but it has to maintain that 25 mile per hour minimum. So now if we look at the 30 mile per hour speed zone, we can only decrease the school speed zone by 5 miles per hour because that 25 is the rock bottom lowest number the speed of that road can be. So it's not complicated. Hopefully I articulated that well enough to shed some light on how that's done, but that's defined by motor vehicle code. What I find is, I shouldn't say a lot, but there are schools out there that have, let's say, a yellow blinking light that blinks all day that says school speed area. And that's very misleading, not only for the people on that road, but a lot of police officers don't know the fine details that they can only enforce that a half an hour before or a half an hour after that school time that's established by the superintendent. So you see a lot of improperly written tickets occurring in those school zones because they're trying to, whether it's intentional or unintentional, but it can be misleading as to when that speed limit is at the school zone drop or at the regular speed limit. So there can be some confusion there. So that's why it needs to be clear and concise, because we don't want to be giving somebody a school speeding zone ticket on a Saturday when they're doing the posted speed limit, but the sign reflects, you know, a yellow blinking light, which indicates that that's active. So we have to be real careful with that. We don't want to be giving bad tickets. So if a school is located in an area that requires school children to cross a state trunk line, and the speed is 35 miles per hour or more, the school superintendent may submit a request to the State Transportation Commission, the County Road Commission, or local authority having jurisdiction over the roadway for a school crossing as permitted. So that's not anything that I really get involved with, but that is good to know that there is a section where you can apply for a school crossing zone, and that's going to be up to MDOT and the Road Commission to determine if they're going to proceed with that. But there is a process to do that. So I thought it was very beneficial to put into this PowerPoint. So in closing, speed limits are a very controversial topic, right? It's a very easy bandwagon to jump on to lower speeds by posting improperly low speed limits. And people don't understand everything that's involved with it. So not only does it make the road less safe, but it also kind of puts law enforcement in a predicament. So a recent example that I'm dealing with right now is we had one of our state drug teams doing surveillance on a car, and they called for a police officer to stop that car. Police officer stops it based off a speeding violation. The speed limit's posted at 35, but there's no traffic control order validating that 35 mile per hour speed limit. They found a large quantity of methamphetamines. Well, now the police officer didn't know it, but they made an illegal stop in the eyes of the law, and everything found after that stop is going to be dismissed. So, you know, it's a lot of different layers. And once you start peeling these layers back, you start to see that these speed limits being accurate and following the proper procedure to be established is super important. Not only that, but once these defense attorneys start figuring out that they can start looking and FOIAing traffic control orders, and they're winning cases doing that, it's only going to increase the amount that it's happening. So it's multifaceted and for good reasons, speed limits should be set properly. And it's not me setting the speed limit. It's not the local township setting the speed limit. It's not politicians setting the speed limit. It's the people who are driving the roads who set the speed limit. So in closing, I hope that clarified some things. Lieutenant, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Not at this point. Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. That was a very valuable presentation, and appreciate all that the Michigan State Police does do and our law enforcement in keeping our roads and citizens safe. I do want to remind the attendees, please use the Q&A box for any questions that you might have. If there is anybody participating by telephone, if you can use the *9 feature to raise your hand, we would sincerely appreciate it. Ellie Blond, our communications administrator here at the Road Commission of Kalamazoo County, is serving as our moderator. So Ellie, I will turn it over to you for any questions that we might have.
Perfect, thank you. And we do have one question opened up, and that is, what is the most common questions that you get and how do you respond? I'm assuming as it pertains obviously to speed limits.
Well, I'd say the most common are typically people wanting to lodge a complaint and try to get motion moved forward to reduce the speed of the road because everybody's speeding. But typically, if everybody's speeding, it's more likely a speed limit issue, not a speeding issue. So most question I get is how to start that process. The process doesn't start with me. Like I said, unfortunately, I do traffic crash reconstruction. I work about 80 fatals, give or take, per year, and that consumes a lot of my time. Not only working the scenes, but the follow-up, and then the court proceedings that follow that with the criminal matters. So most of the time, that has to start with the road commission or the local MDOT facility if they want to do an actual speed study. A lot of times people don't fully understand that process, but it starts locally. And then if the road commission or MDOT feels that there's a need to conduct a study, we move forward from there.
Perfect. The next question that we have is, we had a speed study done 8 years ago. When should we have another? And they apologize if they missed this in the PowerPoint.
Well, we're supposed to look at these every 10 years. This used to be a unit that had three troopers and a lieutenant for every district who did nothing but the traffic control orders. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to look at everyone every 10 years. I do the best I can with the time and resources I have, but typically it could be a 10 years. If somebody requests it, we'd do a 10 years. That's if the road commission or MDOT wanted to move forward with that. But what you see is if there's not a change in the environment, there's not a change in the roadway speed. So I have all of my files that go back to whenever the original speed study was done. And they go back, to the 40s, 50s, 60s, and I'll do another speed study on that same road. If the environment hasn't changed, the 85th percentile is typically within 1 mile per hour of what it was in 1960. So it doesn't change unless the environment changes, typically.
Thank you. And I am going to start, actually, if you could indicate in the chat if you'd like to have your video on, just because it's flipping back and forth between individuals. If you'd like to have an on-camera discussion, let me know. and I can turn your camera on for you. I will be moving on to the next question, which is, how do accidents impact setting speed? Is it still the 85th percentile?
If there is a common problem with the speed, then we'll look at that. But the majority of the fatal crashes that I investigate are not speed related. You know, for example, I had 2 car pedestrians that I worked Monday. One was a drugged driver who ran over a bicyclist. He was doing the speed limit. There was no pre-impact braking. There was no maneuvers. He just was on drugs and wasn't paying attention and hit and killed a bicyclist. I had another one, car pedestrian Monday. That was a person darting across the road who dropped their pizza sauce in a multi-lane highway, turned back to grab that pizza sauce, but there was a car in that same lane. That car made a lane change to the right lane. Instead of the pedestrian going north, which was the direction he was going, he chose to go south. So they're now both occupying the same lane that they maneuvered from. I don't want to say or dehumanize it, but it's no different than a deer darting out in front of a car. They happen. When somebody darts out in front of your vehicle, it's unexpected. There's no room for change at that point. Let's see, Wednesday, it was a fatal where a drunk driver at 9 o'clock in the morning crossed the freeway median and was struck by the opposite direction freeway driver. So that's alcohol involved. That was not speed. I calculated his speed at like 74 miles per hour on the freeway. So that really wasn't an issue there. It's more of the drunk driving. And again, we're still waiting for toxicology results on that, but there's open containers in the car. There's a lot of signs that indicate that's what it's going to be. Wednesday, a car legally passing another car. The car they were passing, they said they were doing about 40. It's a 55 mile per hour zone. The car's in a legal passing zone. He's passing a vehicle, and you had a semi pull out from a private driveway who's only looking westbound when this car was coming at them in the eastbound lane. And now they're both occupying the same lane. So he wasn't speeding. He was just passing a car that was doing 15 miles per hour under the speed limit. Saturday was an intersection crash. That was, I'm still working on that one, but suspected that the driver didn't come to a complete stop before entering the intersection, caused a crash. So these aren't really speed issues. Speed gets the most attention, but it's drugged driving, it's drunk driving, it's distracted driving. That's what's killing people. It's not the sign changes from 40 to 45 miles per hour. That's not doing it.
If I could jump in, Brandon. At the federal level, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration over-reports speed as being a contributing factor to crashes because they lump in violation of basic speed law, too fast for conditions. So people sliding off during inclement weather or running into the back of a car during inclement weather. And they also lump in speeds that are so egregious that they'd be considered reckless driving rather than speeding. And it makes it look like, going 10 over is a significant cause of crashes, but it's just the way they're reporting it. The biggest cause of crashes is 2 vehicles or 2 people trying to be in the same place at the same time.
Yeah, and that's a great point. So a good example for that, which Lieutenant was just talking about, is right here in the I-94 corridor, wintertime, we have a lot of crashes, and those people are being cited and being checked off as too fast for the roadway conditions. Well, what that translates to is they're speeding. They could have only been doing 15 miles per hour and lost control on an ice-covered freeway. They're still getting too fast for conditions, which shows up as a speeding violation. They don't distinguish between the two. Even though they were doing 50 miles per hour under what the limit was posted at, they still were too fast and lost control of their car for the conditions.
Thank you. I'll move on to the next question, which is actually just a clarification. Do all of these laws and codes that you've talked about today, do those apply to cities and villages as well?
Most certainly. So the biggest thing, I hear this a lot and I always try to correct it. A lot of times I don't, but they say this is Michigan State Police. That's the Michigan State Police way. It's really not. It's the way the law is written, and I'm a police officer and I'm in charge of making sure that it's done properly. I'm just enforcing the law that's written. So it's not the Michigan State Police way. This is engineering principles that are used nationwide, if not worldwide, to set safe and realistic speed limits. So I do not do those for cities and villages, but they still have to abide by the same law because it's Michigan law of the process to do that. So I don't personally do it for them. They do it themselves, but we have the same standards that we have to legally abide to.
Thank you.
Traditionally, a lot of cities and villages were not aware of the standards. And so when they changed the law in 2006 and again in 2017, they put in some clarifying language. And a lot of cities and villages are looking at it as a new requirement. It's just simply clarification of the requirement that's existed since 1949.
Thank you. I'll move to the next question. How many speed studies do you handle per year?
That varies. Also, I used to work up in the Grand Rapids area. I had 14 counties. About 2 years ago with the same position, I just transferred down to Southwest Michigan, which is 9 counties. So I would say, give or take, probably 100. That's a rough number, but I would say roughly around 100. And then, there are times where if I get caught up with my crashes and I have time, I'll go through and review some of the older ones to verify that they're still good to go. But usually that's brought to my attention and put towards the top of the list. Like, hey, something's not right here. You may want to look at this one. When I get the time, if I'm going to start diving into that, those are the ones I go after.
Thank you. Next question. Do roads count into the number of vehicle access points equal to driveways?
So those are intersections that you're referring to, and they can, but typically if you're doing access point counts, you're not doing multiple intersections because that's going to be a long length of roadway.
Thank you. And then we have another question, which is, once you've established properly, what would you or when would you revisit the speed limit, or what would cause a reversal, if anything?
Well, probably not a reversal because the study is done with certain standards, and I meet those standards when I do my job. This is my job. I'm a professional. This is what I do. So it wouldn't be redacted unless there is a major roadway change. So let's say a year from now, they come through and change it from a 5-lane to a 2-lane with a center turn lane and bike lanes on the outside. Well, that's really going to dramatically change the environment of that road. Or let's say they, you can name anything, but if there's a change to the environment or the roadway configuration, we'll relook at it. But if I've looked at it and 2 years from now, you want me to relook at it because you don't like the results, it's not going to happen. I don't have time to continuously redo the same speed study because people aren't happy with the results. The speed of the road is the speed of the road. It's the environment that has to change.
Thank you for that. I don't have any further questions in the Q&A box at this time, and it doesn't look like I have any that may have made their way to the chat section either. I don't have any hands up. Does anybody have, are there any attendees that would like to speak or to ask any questions, I should say, at this time? If you would like to, just a reminder, raise your hand and I will call on you.
Ellie, it appears we do have one more question.
We just got one more that came into the Q&A. Do school crossings improve school pedestrian safety? Presently, crossing guards are used. Does that impact driver perception of safe speed?
Lieutenant, I'll probably pass that to you or maybe Jim. I don't do a lot with the school specifics, other than make sure that they're, to law. So I'll pass that to somebody else.
School crossing guards have a bigger impact on safety than trying to reduce the speed limit in the area, because the school crossing guard can make that decision whether to step out in front of traffic and stop cars, and can also assist in getting kids out of the way should they see a driver that appears that they're not going to stop for whatever reason, it's distracted or not paying attention.
Sergeant Davis, can you please also introduce Sergeant Gerard, who is joining us this morning?
Yeah, so Sergeant Chris Gerard, he is part of our MSP legislative liaison unit. So he does a lot with the politicians. He kind of gets to know what bills are being represented, are being brought forward. So we asked him to come and give us a legislative update, maybe to talk about some of the recent changes or some of the proposals that are coming down through Lansing.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. Can everybody hear me? Okay. All right, good. Yep, I'm Sergeant Chris Gerard, MSP Government Relations Section, and I've been with the department for a little more than 10 years now. The last 2 years, or 2.5 years in government relations. So like Brandon said, review policy, legislation that's been introduced, and then work with internally with MSP and outside stakeholders as well, our other law enforcement groups, the Prosecuting Attorneys Association, Michigan Sheriff's Association, Chiefs of Police, to determine what kind of impact introduced legislation would have on the department and law enforcement and public safety in the state of Michigan, and then work internally to determine official department positions as we weigh in on legislation. So a little bit of what we do, we also provide or do legislative updates to different groups across the state of Michigan. This session there's not a ton on the traffic control front. There is a speed limit bill in play right now, and it's House Bill 4014. I wasn't quite sure what the group was looking for from an overall update perspective. Again, we don't have a lot with in regards to traffic or speed related issues like we've been talking about this morning. But House Bill 4014 is a speed limit bill. And then I just have a brief summary here from, I don't know how many people on here on the meeting follow legislation. You can go to the Michigan Legislature page and any bills or legislation that you are interested in following, you can type those bill numbers in, you can do a keyword search, and you can get a history of that legislation. And then a lot of the introduced bills that are gaining traction and have received committee hearings, you can also read the fiscal analysis that's been put together either from the House or the Senate, depending on where the bill had been introduced. So with 4014, it's pretty detailed bill. There's a lot there, so I'm not going to go through the entire thing, but I wanted to give you that bill number. It is one that's gained some traction and has passed the House and then probably will be receiving a hearing in the Senate here at some point. But it would modify the procedure for establishing speed limits under 628 that Brandon and the Lieutenant have discussed already today. Bill would remove the reference to an engineering and safety study and require instead that the modified speed limit be determined in accordance with traffic engineering practices that provide an objective analysis of the characteristics of the highway, as well as by the 85th percentile speed on the fastest portion of the segment for which the speed limit is being posted. I'm going to leave it at that. My understanding is the bill is focused on the cities and villages, which came up in one of the discussion points. So if anybody's interested in reading more of that, the analysis does a really good job of really breaking that legislation down so that you can follow it and understand it. It was introduced January 26th of this year and passed the Committee on Transportation in the House. It then passed the House floor 94-13 on March 24th. And then on the following day, it was referred to the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure in the Senate and is currently awaiting a hearing. So if anybody has any interest in that, plug it in 4014 on the Michigan Legislature page and you'll be able to review that analysis.
Thank you. We actually have a question and a comment in the Q&A. First is a comment, and it is thanks for your service and for protecting all of us. And then the second is a question, and that is, can we have a copy of those House bills?
Yeah, so first, appreciate the comments. Michigan Legislature, I don't have them handy here, but go to the Michigan Legislature page, and it's fairly self-explanatory. Once you get there, right on the top, it'll say bill number. Punch in the bill number, hit enter, and it's going to bring you to that specific legislation.
Thank you very much for that update. Appreciate that in terms of the legislative aspect as well. Making the final call for any questions that you might have in the Q&A. Allie, I do not see any hands raised. No. All right, with that concludes our Establishing Realistic Speeds and More informational session. Really want to thank our team here at the Road Commission, our board, as well as our Michigan State Police participants and panel this morning. It was very informative. We have been recording this and it will be available for future reference on our Road Commission website at www.kalamazoocountyroads.com. With that, we will conclude our session. Thank you very much for your attendance today and participation, and be safe, and keep in mind our next session in May. Thank you.